And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Microsoft Word, using forms to manage content. I'm going to hand things over to our featured presenter today. He is a New Horizons instructor, Tom Keene. Tom, you now have the floor.
Thank you, and good morning or afternoon, everybody, depending where you are. I am Tom Keene, a Microsoft certified trainer with New Horizons Computer Learning Centers in Eagan, Minnesota. As you can see, I have 20 plus years of training experience. I specialize in Microsoft Office and Adobe applications, and I have a background as a sports editor, a photographer, a voiceover artist, and as a publications manager. So in this webinar today, we're going to take a look at ways you can create forms using Microsoft Word. So almost every business uses forms of some type to collect information. Today, a form can either be printed or it can be an electronic document. Either on paper or on a computer screen, the form prompts the user to fill in various fields to gather a set of data. So in this webinar, we're going to create one type of form in Microsoft Word. Now, a form is basically defined as a document used for collecting information in a consistent format. Both paper-based and electronic forms contain boilerplate text such as a form title, data labels, and of course, fields. One of the key options in designing a form, of course, is trying to determine what kind of information you want to collect and what is the appropriate field to do that. So users, of course, then can enter the information into various fields, but typically I don't want them to be able to alter the form in any way. So usually in planning a form, whether it's going to be in Word, whether it's going to be on a web page, you need to think about what information you want to collect and where do you want that information to actually appear in the form. You also need to consider how the form will be distributed and whether or not you want to protect the form from any kind of modifications. When you begin creating the form, in Word, you might want to consider to use a table to contain various form fields. Tables are wonderful tools because they allow you to have more precise control over exactly where data goes. Typically, when I create a form using a table, I have two columns. One is going to contain the data label, and the next column is typically going to contain the field that I want. Speaking of fields, a form field is defined as a container inserted into the form, and it's used for collecting a specific type of information. Each form field has a name signifying the type of entry it requires, and you can use content controls or legacy form fields to create a form. It's recommended that you don't mix content controls and legacy form fields in the same document. And we're going to point out what those are in just a bit. So each form field is used to collect a particular type of data, and there are three main types of form fields. They are text, that's used to collect different kinds of text, numeric, and date-related info. Checkboxes, used to allow users to select several answers from several choices. And then drop-downs, which are used to allow the users to select a single answer from several choices. Form fields have their own particular set of options. These options then can be used to determine the type and format of data that the user is allowed to enter and how that input is actually captured. Form field options vary based on the type of form field that would be selected. Now, in Microsoft Word, if I'm going to spend a lot of time with forms, one of the things that I may want to do is to actually bring up what's called my Developer tab, which is typically not turned on. So to add my Developer tab in Word, I'm going to begin by going to File and choosing Options. In the Word Options dialog box, I want to choose Customize My Ribbon. And then I will see my Developer tab, and by default, it is not selected. So I'm going to check it and then click OK. And now I have my developer tab. By choosing my developer tab, this is where I have my various form controls that I can use to create and manage my form. Some of those are existing fields, some of them are legacy fields. So when I'm working with it, I have my controls group, and that is where I can actually then select the type of control I'd like to enter. Some of my control tools include rich text. That enables the user to enter formatted text and special characters, such as a tab. There's plain text. That enables the user to enter unformatted info. I could insert a picture, so you can paste a picture into a control. I could have my building block gallery. That enables the user to select and insert a building block from a designated gallery of document building blocks. I could add checkboxes. We could add a combo box, which enables the user to select one choice from a preset list or type in a choice. I can have my drop-down list that restricts the user to selecting one choice from a preset list. The user then cannot enter extra information. I'd have my date picker that enables the user to select a date from a pop-up calendar. One of the things, if I'm developing forms and I want to have collecting the same information over and over again, I could add a repeating area. This enables the user to add additional sections of the form. So they can add another row of a form with the same fields as an existing row. And then we have our legacy tools, which are items that are left over from earlier versions of Microsoft Word.
Hi, Tom. Sorry to interrupt. Can you just make the, can you zoom into the form? It's a little small, so hard to see. Not sure if you can make it a little bit bigger for all to view. I know some folks are viewing this already at maximum and it's still a little hard. Not sure if you can do that for us.
Yes, I can see about changing the actual resolution of the monitor here, so I can minimize my Word.
Perfect, thank you.
And see if I can change the display monitor. And let's see if I can make that. And then I'll zoom in a little later, but that can make the controls, I think, just slightly larger in that space.
Wonderful, thank you.
You are welcome. Now, one thing to keep in mind, because there are various versions of Microsoft Word around, content controls that you see here, and this is Word 2019, they're not compatible with Word 2003 or any earlier versions of Excel. There was a time, of course, I had to be very concerned that so many people were still using Word 2003. Today, not quite as much, but it's still a factor. There are still a lot of people using different versions of the program. Now, once I've entered one of these various content controls, then I will have different kinds of options that I would need to set. For example, if I use a combo box or a drop-down list control, I'm going to need to specify the options from which the user can select. If there's a date picker control, that has option to set the date format that I want to use. With the building block control, that allows me to specify which gallery and categories users can select content from. If I am building something that I want to be compatible with people using the earlier version of Microsoft Word, that is where I'd have to start using my legacy controls. Legacy form fields appear shaded in a document, and unlike content controls, form fields can be used to collect and save the data in a delimited file that can be imported into another application and enable you to print just the data from completed forms. So if that's an option, you might want to bypass the content controls and go right to your legacy controls. If I'm also using legacy, one of the things I will have to do is to lock the form so that those things would actually be real usable controls. Now, displaying a document container in design mode enables me to edit the contents of the placeholder text. Every time I drop in a placeholder or a piece of control, there's going to be a placeholder telling the user what to do. Often I will need to personalize or modify that in some way. So to get started, I have this document from Building with Heart, and it is a donor form. And I've added a table, which I want to collect from the donor their first name, their last name, the address, city, state, phone number, email address. I want their donation type, a monthly gift or a one-time gift, and I have the receiving branch and the date that they received. Now, this is currently a table. If I click on the actual table, I see my table tools on my ribbon. And from my table tools, I have the ability to change the design and the layout of them. Now, when I get started working with a table, I would actually like to see the table cells. In this current view, that stuff is hidden. So the first thing I want to do is to choose my table and then go to my table controls on the ribbon. And I'm going to begin by choosing the Layout tab. And then I want to go into my table group of tools. And in table group, I have what's called View Grid Lines. And when I turn that on, I can actually see the table structure, so I know where one column is and where the other column is. Now, these, of course, don't print. If I wanted them to print, I could put borders around the table. This is kind of like Excel. When I have the cells, I can see them in the Excel app, and then I can actually draw borders if I want them to print. So what I want to do now is to insert a control. For first name, the control type I want is going to be a plain text control. So I want to then go back to my Developer tab on the ribbon. And in my controls group, I want to choose the plain text control. And that drops in that control. You see it has this default label, click or tap here to enter text. A little later, I'm going to show you how we'll modify that. So I want to do the same thing for last name, same kind of control. So I'm going to choose the next row in my table and click Insert Plain Text. I'm going to do that also for address, city, state, phone number, and email address. Now, I want to save myself a little bit of time. So I'm going to choose the next row of my table, and I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut. It's the repeat feature. And anytime in a Microsoft app, I've done a command, and I want to just keep doing it, I can press the F4 key on my keyboard, and that's a repeat. So I'm going to go to the next row, press F4, move to the next row, press F4, go to the next row, press F4, next row, F4. I also want to do that for my donations. So again, I'm going to go to that area of my form, press the F4 key, and insert it. Now, for the branch section, what I'd like to do is to create a drop-down list. And remember, with a drop-down list, people are only going to be able to select one item in the list, and they don't get to add anything special. So again, I'm going to go back to my controls on the ribbon and tell it I'd like to insert the drop-down control. Next, I want to set some properties for the control that I just added. So again, in my controls group, I'm now going to go to properties. And this opens up the content control property dialog box for me. I want to start by giving this a title. So I'm going to type in the title as branch. Then, of course, if I wanted, I can see a bounding box around it. I can add color formatting to it. But I'm going to skip that right now and go down to locking. And then I want to choose content control cannot be deleted. And that means, of course, when someone later gets to the form, they can't toss it out. Now with a drop-down list, what I need to do next is to provide the values that the user can select. So want to move down to our drop-down list under display name. So in display name, I want to choose add, type in downtown. And then of course I can make it be a value. If the downtown would be the display name and value is what I want to actually store as part of the value. That might be different if you were ultimately exporting this to, say, a database. But right now I'm just going to click OK, and I have my item. I've got a few other regions, so I'm going to click add the next one, Western King County. Click OK. And click add again. And I want to add Eastern King County. And again, click OK. So now I've added my 3 choices to the drop-down list. I want to click OK now to finish. And now I want to verify that my drop-down list is going to work. So under receiving branch, I'm going to click the drop-down item, and there I see the entries that I've made. If I need to alter that in any way, again, I can choose the control, go back to properties, and again, add a value or continue making other changes. And then to get out of this list, I can simply just press my escape key. Next, I want to handle the date. So I want to add a date picker control to my form. So again, I'm going to click in the empty cell of my table. And then I want to choose the date picker. So next, I'm going to configure the format in which the date that they select will be displayed. So for that, I'm going to go back to my control group and back to properties. So from this list, I can choose my display the date option. In this case, I want to use the long date with the day, the date, month, day, and year. Again, I want to tell it the locale and the type of calendar and how I plan to store that information. So right now, once I've selected my format, I click OK, and my date pick should be good to go. And then I can see my calendar and then choose a particular date from it. So this would be different ways that I could insert a particular control. Next, I want to deal with these default captions for the control. Click or tap here to enter text. Sometimes when I'm building a form, I may have a very, very narrow column, and I don't have that much room for a really long caption. Excuse me. So what we're going to do next is to change these individual labels for the controls. To do that, I have to enter what's called my design mode. So in my controls group, I want to choose design mode. So now I can actually click inside of this placeholder text and type whatever I want. So I'm going to start by selecting the click or tap here to enter text for first name. Again, I want to be careful that I just select the text inside. And then I'm going to type. I want to see first name and middle initial. And then, of course, I could actually tell it I want that displayed in any formatting, any font, any size. I might want to reduce that, say, for example, to size 10, make it a little smaller, and how I want that actually to be displayed. I then want to go down to my phone number. Again, I want to type a specific label for that text. So I'm going to highlight my text and type enter a direct number. And again, I want to go back to my date placeholder and type more specific instructions. So I highlight my text and type today's date. Then once I have made all of these changes, I need to get out of my design mode. So I go back to my controls group and turn off design mode. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and save my revised donation form. So I'll do a file, save as, and I will use the current folder as the location. And I will just make it my donation form, and I will continue to save this as a Word document, and then click Save. As I mentioned, forms that contain legacy form fields, they have to be protected or locked in order for the form fields to actually function. Content controls, like the ones you see here, don't need to be in a protected form to be active, but it's a pretty good idea to protect your form to keep users from inadvertently modifying different parts of it. So because I want users to be able to complete the form, the filling in form setting in restrict editing task pane allows the users to actually enter information into the form field, but they can't change anything else in our document. So having designed the form, having added the fields to the form, having changed the data labels, the next thing I want to do is to lock my form. Also, having created this, I might want to use this form as a template for future forms. So this way I don't have to reinvent the wheel. So first thing I'm going to do is to set my editing restrictions. So for that, I want to choose my Protect group on the ribbon. And in the Protect group, I want to choose Restrict Editing. Now that's going to open the Restrict Editing panel on the right side of my screen. And again, I can stretch that out so you can see a little bit more of that and all the labels in there very clearly. So I have under restricting options, formatting restrictions. And this can be very nice if, for example, I have a designer. Someone's going to enter new text in here. And for text, if I've used only certain styles like heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, I may not want somebody introducing a heading 4 or heading 5. So I could then choose limit from a selection set of styles, go to my settings, and then tell it which styles that I used in this document so that people cannot add any additional styles. Styles are a big part of working in Microsoft Word. Again, that's a topic for a future webinar. So right now I'm going to tell it, no, I'm not really too worried about the formatting. I instead want to concentrate on my form. So this is where I want to go to number 2, editing restrictions. And then I want to choose allow only this type of editing in the document. So the most severe, no changes at all. This is a read-only file. Not very good for forms. So from that drop-down list, I can tell it I want to do this for track changes, or commenting, or filling in the forms, which of course is what we want to use here. So that way the user has the ability to interact with those form controls and give me the data I am trying to collect. And then once I've selected my formatting restrictions and my editing restrictions, I am ready to start enforcement of those policies. So yes, I can choose, I want to start enforcing protection. And here you have the option, if you'd like, to include a password. Now, passwords can be good and bad. Obviously, having passwords means that I have control over the form so that no one else can make a change unless they know the password. The bad part of a password, of course, is managing passwords. In a Microsoft program, if I give a password to something, I have to make sure I write that password down someplace secure where I can retrieve it. Unlike many websites that give you the option of resetting your password, you don't have that option here. So if you password protect something like a form and you forget the password, you could be in big, big trouble. So that's a key decision you'll want to make in setting this up. Do you want to protect it with or without the password? We're going to do both. So I'm going to type in my password right now. So I'm just going to type password. And yes, I know that's not a secure password, so I'm just using that for demonstration purposes. And again, I want to confirm that by typing in password again. And then I want to click OK. So right now, if someone needed to make a change to the design or the form itself, they would need to stop the protection. By doing stop protection, then they're prompted for that particular password. So right now I'm going to close the restricting panel so I can go back to work with my document. Next, having created this password protected document, I want to use this as a template. So for the next Building with Art campaign, I can just go back to this particular file and use this particular form. Saving something as a template is a pretty easy process. So I would first go to File and choose Save As. Please note it's saying, of course, this is a protected document. Now, it's going to ask you to choose a destination. When you're saving something as a template, there is a specified templates folder on your computer where the templates go. You will automatically be redirected to that template folder as soon as you tell it what type of file you are creating. So initially, when you're choosing a file location, it could be anything. So I'll just use the current location, use forms to manage my data. I'm going to call this file my donation form template. And then from the Save as Type drop-down list, I want to choose, I'm saving this as a Word template. Now, if you also had added macros to your document, I could make this a macro-enabled template, or if I wanted to make it compatible with earlier copies of Word, I may choose the 97-2003. So right now, I'm just going to tell it it's a standard Word template. And that automatically then redirects me to my custom Office template folder on my computer. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And I've now converted this document into a template. Once I've created the template, the next step is to build a document from that particular template. So to use the template for a new project, I would begin by choosing File, New. And on the New page, you're going to see a bunch of pre-built templates that you can grab. If you'd like, you can go online to search for additional types of templates for certain kind of projects. Well, I want to use a template I created. That would be a personal template. So I'm going to click the personal link, and there would be the personal templates that I have created. In this example, of course, there's just the one. So I'd select it, and now I've created a new document based on that template. That's a really great feature in Microsoft Word. If there's any kind of project that you have to use over and over and over again, instead of saving the file, opening the file, do a save as, make your changes, save the file, and start that process over again. Simply convert it into a template with all the things you need already in place, And that way you don't have to remove any old data. You can always start fresh. So now for this particular campaign, I am ready to start entering some of my form information. So from this information, I want to start by entering my name. So I'm going to just type in a sample name. So Dan J. For the last name, I will be Smith. And note I can use my tab keys to quickly move from control to control. For the address, type in any address. For my city, I'm going to use the fictional city for this example, Green City, fictional state, RL. And when it comes to states, I know many people are very tempted to use a drop-down list. I have relatives that live in Wisconsin. I always feel so badly for them because they're always at the bottom of a list. I have found that in many cases, when I am actually using state codes, I don't use drop-down lists. I figure most people can simply type in the stated abbreviation. So I often just create it as a text field rather than a drop-down list. But again, that's just a personal choice you can make. So I want to enter my phone number. Again, I can enter a phone number 555-555-1234. And then please note, this does not have an input mask like you'd see in, say, Microsoft Access that converts that into a phone number. So again, you might want to write a note for somebody telling them if they're writing this, they might actually have to add the parentheses and the hyphens and the spaces. And then I can add a sample email address, djsmith@example.com. Monthly gift format, again for text, I can type in this will be $100. And then I want to go to my receiving branch. That's my drop-down list. And then I can choose my location. And then I can use my date picker. And then I could choose either today's date. I could also click today to insert it. And there would be the formatting that I want to use. Since the user has now filled out this data, what I want to do now is to go ahead and save a copy of this form with the data in it. So I'm going to do my file, save as, and again, I will choose my existing folder. For the file name, I will type in, this would be my completed form. I do plan to save it as a Word doc. And then I can click my save button. Then once I'm done with this file, I can close the file. And then behind it, I still have my template open. So if I wanted to continue to play around with my template, I could certainly do that. So that's my process of creating a form and filling out the form. Next, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about modifying a form. Typically, once you built a form for the first time, it's going to make perfect sense to you as a designer. Once you start using a form, there you may get feedback that you need to add things, change things, or clarify options. That would mean, of course, modifying your form up here. So what we're going to do next is say right now that working with my data, there is a particular control that I no longer need. Now, first, if I'm going to modify a control, I'm going to have to select it. And one of the ways I can actually do that is to use what's called the content control. And very often these would have different kinds of titles to them. So if I'd click on it, I'd see a little title at the very top of the form, and there'd be a handle on the side of it that would allow me to select it either with or without a title. It's the same way if I'm working with a table. I have to choose the entire table if I'm going to work with it, not just the data inside of the table. So in this form, having played with it a bit, I want to delete the today's date field. And before I can change the form template, I'll also need to remove the protection. Once we're done editing, we'll reprotect the form, but because I want anyone else in my company to be able to modify it, I'm not going to include a password. So it will be protected, but it can be easily unlocked for updates. That might be very handy in organizations where they have high turnovers. If it's got someone with a personal password protection and they leave, gee, did they write down the password for me? So to begin the process, I'm going to back to my Developer tab and click Restrict Editing. So now in my Restrict Editing panel, I want to click Stop Protection. And of course, I hope I remember my password. So I'm going to type it in. Now it's open for doing any kind of editing that I need. So for right now, I'm just going to turn that panel off so I can make my changes. So I want to start by going to my today field. And again, I did not give that a name as part of its property. So if I wanted to select that field, I now have this content control handle on the side of it. So when I click on it, Word now knows that entire control is selected. And then from here, I can tell it, of course, that I want to simply press delete to remove it. And if I don't need my date field at all, I can go to my table layout, choose delete, and tell it to delete this row of the table. Notice that one of the controls I actually did give a name. And if I use that particular name, that name would show up at the very top of the area. I did that, I think, for branch. And there you can actually see the name of it. And then you can choose it from here. So having made my changes to the document, what I want to do next is to protect the template again. So I'm going to back to my Developer tab, and I'm going to restrict editing. Again, I'm going to keep the same options, filling in forms. Yes, I want to start enforcing protection. But this time, I'm just going to leave the password blank. So I click OK. I now want to save my changes to my template. And I'm going to close Restrict Editing. And then, of course, if someone wants to make edits in the future, they can go back to Restrict Editing, Stop Protection, and they don't have to worry about the whole password option. Then I'm going to go ahead and close my document. Now, one of the other courses that I teach at New Horizons is Adobe Acrobat. Acrobat is another great tool that you can use to create forms. It also has a great option in it that if you have created certain boxes or controls inside of a Microsoft Word document, it will often detect those when you're converting the file into a PDF. I have found this works best if you don't use tables for the layout. The simpler the Word document is, the easier it is for Acrobat to convert it into an actual PDF file. So I want to create a second form, a little simpler. In this document, I have something for a tool checkout form. So anytime that someone wants to check out the data, I need their tool name, their asset number, their checked out by, the name of the project, their date, and the date it was checked in. So again, I don't have to worry about seeing my table borders. They're already there as part of a table style. So I want to start by going to my Developer tab on my ribbon, and then I'm going to insert my plain text control. And again, I can just use my F4 key to repeat. And then I might want to choose my date picker and then insert my date picker. I now want to modify one of the controls where it says the name of the project manager. So that's where I want to go up to my design mode. And I can type and enter the name of the project manager. And then I can turn off my design mode. There's my new label. And then finally, I may want to go to restrict editing. Tell it again, people can fill in the form and then start my enforcement without a password. So then I could say this would be my backhoe, asset number 1001, checked out by Dan Jensen for the project. The Main Street project, checked out by, I checked it out today, and I'm going to check it back in on Friday. Then from here, I can save my document. Give it my name, completed, and then save this as a Microsoft Word file. Again, that's a look at creating forms in Word 2019. There's other controls you can use for forms. It also has been a part of the Office 365. It has a pretty nice little form tool for creating and working with different kinds of forms as well. So now, gang, I'll go ahead and open up the presentation for any questions that anyone has about using the form tool with Word. This would also, by the way, be the same if you were using Word for Office 365.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Just giving folks a second just to type in their questions here.
Sure.
Just so you know, as a reminder, if you're interested in any of the material that Tom presented here in this webinar, or if you just have questions regarding what's available to you, please contact your local center for more information. You can log on to newhorizons.com and do a quick zip code search for the center that's nearest you. Also, just so you all know that New Horizons, we've been teaching virtual online training since 2001. All of our instructors and facilitators, they're trained to teach face-to-face and also virtually with great ratings. All of our instructors, such as Tom, they do such an amazing job. And also, if you're interested in any leadership training, we also have that with our Center for Leadership and Development. We have about 50, 60 resources that are available to you after you finish those courses. Also, our webinar schedule is up to date. Thank you for joining us today on this one. But if you go to our website, you can click on the webinars link just to view the full schedule and register for any upcoming sessions. Next week, we have a great special series going on called the Empower Yourself series, Rise to the Challenge. So please feel free to check that out and take a look. And I think we have quite a few questions that came in, Tom. Some of them are just kind of re-showing what you did here. One question is there a way to have the text shrink based on how many characters are in the field?
I think for something like that, you would need to actually kick this up a notch and start doing programming with things like Visual Basic for applications. These might be things like ActiveX controls. That's another category of controls you can use, and they allow for certain kinds of programming features. So the other thing you might want to do, instead of creating a box, one of the other options you might can do is called a text area. And one of the key things with the text area is it allows you to add multiple lines of text. In form planning, you might decide that with the text area, it'll often have scroll boxes. So rather than get text to shrink, what it might do is to say, okay, if you wrote 80 lines, I want to see maybe the first 10, and you'd have to scroll to see the rest. but I don't know one that has one of the fitting properties that easily allows you to simply tell it, I'd like to change the values that go with that particular form. But again, if I start going back and unrestricting and stop the protection, then this is where I might want to take one of the controls and take a look at some of the various properties. So you can see that I don't have a ton of choices for the properties for controlling it.
Great. The next question is, if you wanted to save, I'm assuming the form as a PDF, would the content controls still work?
They should work, because a PDF also handles form options. So if, for example, I decided I wanted to clear out my data, and again, I just wiped out the controls. So again, I could just quickly remove them and do something straightforward, and then tell it I would like to add text field, a text field, a text field, and a text field. Then if I told it I wanted to do a save as, actually I could do an export this as a PDF. I could choose to open this after my publishing, and I could set my various options for a PDF, how much I'm going to publish it, what kind of controls do I want, and then I'm just going to click the publish. Now, because I don't have Adobe Acrobat Reader or Acrobat on my computer, I can open up in Microsoft Edge. And in this version of a PDF, no, that's not something that would have to be converted. I have found that if I want to convert something as a PDF, you might want to make this actually open it up as a PDF form and actually use Adobe Acrobat to do that conversion process. So I have had pretty good luck with Acrobat if I simply create a new blank document. And if I want to collect text data, I might type, for example, name. And then if I go to my insert, choose a shape and choose a text list and draw out a text box. And then, of course, tell it under this formatting that I want this to have basically no fill. If I convert this into a PDF, if I open this up in Acrobat directly, Acrobat will recognize that as a text field, and it could actually be populated. So it doesn't really go directly from Word using form controls into PDFs. You'd want to keep it simple and let let Acrobat determine which fields should be form controls. So I'd use one or the other. I wouldn't build a form as I did and demonstrated in this presentation and then try to switch that over to PDF.
Great. Another question is, this person is specifically speaking to her and what form she's using it for. She said she was asking, the form is for donors. How would the donors get access to the form? Would it be emailed to each donor in order for them to fill out the information?
Yes, that would be one of the options. Is once you have your template, save it as a file, and you could send it out as an email attachment, and then simply ask them to fill it out and send it back to you. So that could be one option. The other thing you could do, if you're using Adobe Acrobat, which we might do a topic, use that as a future webinar with forms in Acrobat, is mention that you could actually then have a distribution center with Acrobat, and you could actually have it sent out to people, and then you could keep track of how it's being sent out, who was it sent out to via email. So that would typically be one option. The other place you might do it is if it's doing it in, say, an internal form rather than external. You might put this on, say, a SharePoint site in a document library with the ability to simply download the file, and then someone inside your organization, or even outside if they have access to SharePoint, could download it from that document library and then fill it out. So that could be another distribution method, but email is very typical.
Great. And then just to piggyback off that same question, once they send out that form to collect the information, would it be used as a one-time use, or can you keep reusing that same form?
If you save it as a template, as I demonstrated, then that would be your option. You could use that same form template and simply create a new document based on it to send it out to someone else. So that way you wouldn't have to get it back, clear out the old data like I was trying to do and refill it out. Just save it as a template, do a new one, you'd be ready to go.
Awesome. The next question is, can you fix the column width but still permit the entries to expand the row height to fit the content?
Again, you might want to do something like that. So if I can lock down a table, some of that's your table control, some of it is your form control. That's why you might want to use a text area and make it a multi-line control. So typically it could cause it to possibly expand. Again, you'd want to decide, do you want to set that with a text area as having a fixed number of rows that are being displayed, or would you like to have it being something that could grow over time? The one thing you want to be careful about is exactly how much space do you want a box to take up. You want someone to write, like, for example, 75 pages of comments? Probably not. That's why in many cases you might want to start adding character restrictions on controls that says, for comments, I'm only want you to put in like a tweet, maybe give you 200 characters. That's all. So I'm not sure there's an easy way to say keep the width locked and have the height be something that's scalable. That's, again, building form controls using other options outside of Word. I don't know that Word allows you to do that.
Great. Good answer to that one. The next one actually is a very interesting question here in linking the forms. It says, can you show how to export the form responses to an Excel sheet or an Access database?
Remember, that's an option that if you're going to use, you have to use your legacy controls. So in this case, if I'm using a legacy control of some kind, I would have to start by choosing a table. So I might want to draw just a quick table. And then I want to use name. And then I would need to go back to my developer tab, go back to my legacy controls, and tell it I would like to insert a text form. If you're creating a form like this using these legacy controls, that does have the ability of being able to isolate the data, collect the data, and export it into a program such as Excel, Word, or Access database. If I'm using the current controls, they don't allow for that capability. So again, that's a little beyond the scope of this particular topic today about using legacy controls, but that might be, again, a nice future topic to deal with that specific situation.
Great. We have lots of great questions. I know we're hitting up at the top of the hour, so let's see if we can get through a few more here. Is there, and I'm not sure if you had covered this, Tom, during the demo, is there an if-then option, meaning some content stays hidden unless you select the checkbox, such as a list of items that may need a second page?
Again, that would be something possible to do with VBA programming, because again, you could start using things that would be ActiveX controls. And with ActiveX controls, then you can start actually opening up the VBA content to go with that control form and then start doing things like logical branching off of it.
Great. And is there a way to link the text boxes so it repeats the information that's already been entered?
Again, that would be with a VBA control that you could say that take the value that was filled out in one form and redisplay it somewhere else. So if I had, for example, did a name and I need the name somewhere else, a VBA control should be able to pick up the data being used in one field, add that as a variable, and have that variable be displayed somewhere else. But just using straight controls, no, that's not an easy thing to do.
Gotcha. This question is more about approvals and signatures. Is there that option to do that with using Microsoft Forms, or would you say Adobe is a more useful tool to do that?
If you're going through a review and process, I think both have it. You can add digital signatures as part of a file here, but if you want to digitally sign a document, I would definitely consider using that in Adobe Acrobat.
Great. Also, do you know from the data that's collected, is there an option to alphabetically sort and, oh, I'm sorry. Is there an option to alphabetically sort and display the items in the drop-down box that you provide on the form?
To alphabetize them, as far as I start doing the controls, no, I don't believe it has that sorting capability. So once I was actually setting up a drop-down list, if I was adding, for example, a control, I want to choose the data item, go to my properties, and starting my data. I can use my move up and down, but I don't see an easy way to actually just hit click sort alphabetical for me. So I guess one of your options, again, is you might start with something in, say, a regular list in Word and sort it, maybe a regular list in Excel and sort it, and then just add it manually here once you got it in the right order. So that instead of making this up on the fly, I might do a little pre-planning, have it all sorted first, and then just use that as a quick sort of template, and then just start adding each item individually.
Okay, a few more questions here. Similar to connecting the form to Access or Excel, and again, not sure if you had mentioned it earlier in the demo, can you connect the form to SharePoint as well?
The form, of course, could live in SharePoint for sure. If I wanted to fill out this type of information, another option might be to create a SharePoint list. And in SharePoint, instead of doing this form control, people could fill it out directly in SharePoint and store the data there. I can, of course, take the form, the completed form, because it's just a document, and choose to add it to a SharePoint library. And once it's in the library, again, you have the usual library access controls. You'd have your versioning controls. You'd also have your check-in, check-out controls, and so on.
Wonderful. You know, those are all the questions that we had today. And look at us, we are pretty much on time and finishing at the top of the hour. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us for today's session. We hope to see you in one of our upcoming webinars next week. Tom has a few more, I believe in June, if not July, that he's also going to be presenting for us. Thank you, Tom, for also presenting on behalf of New Horizons. With that said, thank you, everyone. Be safe, and you may now log off from the webinar. Thank you.